Hello, I'm Dennis Dyson. I've written a new book, Looking for Jesus in the Old Testament. It's, I think, an interesting book, and I think people would like to read it. But I'd like to tell you a little about myself. I've been a Sunday school teacher for 50 years, and I've also taught adult Bible studies and have a great interest in reading the Bible and trying to teach other people the things that I've learned through the Bible. And this is one of the many lessons that I've learned, is that the Bible is all about Jesus, Old Testament and New Testament. So I got all excited and looked to write this book, Looking for Jesus in the Old Testament. And Aletha?
I'm Aletha Voges, and my book is Walking with God Through Life. This is my second book, but I began walking with God through life as a youngster, and when I was sat at my dad's feet and listened to him read the Bible stories out of an Eggemeyer's Bible story book. And then I grew up and became a Lutheran school teacher. And it was interesting. I had one child, as I was leading the Bible study one day, when I finished, he just sat there. He said, "Miss Schroeder, you should have been a preacher." And I thought, I must have been waxing eloquent, because I have no idea what I was talking about or what the lesson was, but he was so impressed about the message that I was giving him that day. So back in 2003, I had written, should I put my writings and my poetry in a book? And so I had that question. Well, I had started writing. I wrote in 1981. I wrote a Bible study, which turned into being a retreat that I wasn't able to give until 2007. And in the meantime, life happened. And my husband developed pancreatic cancer, and so after walking with him through that, my friend said, "Oh, you got to write a book. You got to write a book." And I said, "I don't know how to write a book. If I'm supposed to write a book, God's going to have to write the book." And so my first book was My Will, God's Response. My will was that my husband get healed. And then God's response was, "I have a different plan for your life." The rest of the title is God's Will, My Response. So God's will, knowing that I had work to do here, then what is my response to God? And then after the first book was out, my friend said, "You got to write another book." And I said, "I don't know. I have all this stuff. I don't know how to put it together. It doesn't fit." I thought, well, I'll put all the poems together. And I went, that's boring. That's no good. And I didn't know what to do with it. And it wasn't until January of 2020 that I was at a prayer renewal retreat, and the pastor friend who was sitting next to me was listening as the gals were asking me about writing a book. And I said, "I don't know how to put it together. It just doesn't fit." And he says, "Sounds like walking with God through life to me." And he said, my eyes lit up. So walking with God through life came to be.
Yeah, now my book, God was the reason I wrote this book. I had written it, like you, another book prior to that, Where Was Eden? It was a short little essay on where I think the Bible says the Garden of Eden was. And I just got the proofs back from the publisher, and I'd given one to my oldest son. And he took it. A few days later, he called me, he'd read the book, and he liked it. And he says, you should write another book. And I thought, what would I write another book about? I'm not really a writer. I thought, well, maybe I'd write a book about looking for Jesus in the Old Testament. And I thought about it for a few days, and I had taken another one of my books and went over to a younger son, to his home, and I gave him the book. And I said, you know what your brother said? He said I should write another one after this. And Brad popped up and said, well, you should write a book about looking for Jesus in the Old Testament. The very words that I had used myself several days before. I don't know why Brad said that, but it kind of sent a tingle up my spine at the time, because I had the feeling God was talking to me. Yeah. So that was the main reason why I wrote this book, was because God was there and speaking to me, and I felt I had a calling, that I had to go write this book.
You just get that feeling, don't you, that you're just kind of compelled. I know when I wrote the first book, I wasn't able to go past the computer without sitting down and writing. And this book is different. This is not a book that you just have to start at the beginning of the book and read it straight through. You can look at the table of contents and find happenings in your life that you might want to know a Bible study on, or you might want to have a devotion on something that's going on in your life. For example, one of them was stress. I have one titled Stress, and we can all figure out some stresses in our life and how do we deal with that. I've got some on guilt and you know, just a lot of things. And then I have this poem. One of the reasons for this title is the first poem that I put on the book is, I went for a walk with God today along the ocean pathway. And it's a story of me walking the path at Pacific Grove, California, in the early 90s. And as I walked, God brought me ideas. For example, I looked to the hills and I said, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. You know, I went for a walk with God today. And as I walked, I saw a myriad of flowers dotting the hillside, and I thought of all the blessings that God bestows upon me. You know, things like that. And then as I left the beach, I kept adding verses to it. And that's why it became very boring, because if you don't intersperse it with other entries, it just didn't hit me as being something that I wouldn't want it to read. But interspersed with different events in my life. And a lot of these are events that happened in my life, or ways that God just touched my life in one way or another, or he brought something to mind and I wrote it. And then Jason had me writing some devotions for the youth on our YouTube channel in 2017 and 18. And I've included those in here too. So there's just a variety.
Yes, I've read your book. And
I've read yours too.
I love many of the anecdotes in there and the poetry. It's very, very nice.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when I think of the Bible and Jesus, my book's about how the whole Bible, is interconnected. The Old Testament and the New Testament. In this one, we're looking for Jesus just in the Old Testament, because he obviously is in the New Testament. But not everybody sees that the Old Testament is really God's story for our salvation. The first 2 chapters of the Bible are about creation and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. But the 3rd chapter is where they rejected God, and all mankind has followed after that 3rd one, their rejection of God, wanting to be like God, and mankind has drifted further and further away from God for the most part. And when I look at that, the first 3 chapters of the Bible, there's where God really wanted us to be. He wanted us to be in Eden, in heaven with Him, in this place. And we rejected Him. So He kicked them out of the garden. And the rest of the Bible, after those first 3 chapters, all the way from Genesis to Revelation, is all about God's plan to get us back to the garden. And that to me is very important. And God's very repetitive. These stories that are in the Old Testament are all about His plan, in one way or another, how He's going to get us back. And He keeps saying the same story over and over and over again. And the fact that the 2 testaments fit together so well. I've heard it said that the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. And the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed.
That's a good...
And it is marvelous to be able to tell the story and show how all the stories, all the history even, is all pointing to Jesus. It's all going to one point. And it's God's way of saying, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do for you to get you back to me. And you can't do it yourself.
Right.
Yes.
And my book is taking off from kind of where you leave off, that this Jesus is the person that we worship, and how do we live in this fallen world as fallen people who need forgiveness? How do we live with the perfect God? Well, we mess up and He forgives us. And then we mess up again and He forgives us again. And it's kind of a story about walking with Him. How do we do that? How can we walk with God through life? It's not easy. Like I say, He keeps forgiving us, and that's the one thing. But we know that in the end, we will walk with Him in heaven. And as you've walked with Him through the Old Testament and found Jesus, Jesus will reveal Himself to us when we walk with Him into heaven.
That the God of the Old Testament is the same God that's in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And many people I've heard have say that, oh, they're a New Testament Christian, because the New Testament has so much fulfillment in it, so much love and understanding that they don't see in the Old Testament. They don't see so much, but it's there.
It's there.
It's there, and I wrote this book so hopefully people can recognize what God's plan is. His plan always was from as soon as Adam and Eve fell. He promised, well, he was talking to the serpent. He was talking to the serpent, and he said that that the ancestor of Eve and the ancestors of Satan.
No,
the descendants. I get that mixed up. You're right. I get that mixed up. the
Descend-
descendants of Eve were going to crush Satan's head. But Satan would still bruise his heel. That was a promise of Jesus, what was going to happen. And Jesus died on the cross in order to save us because we couldn't do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And in almost all the stories in the Old Testament, from Adam and Eve to Abraham and Isaac, story about Jesus. Our first Passover, it's a story about Jesus. It's God saying, look what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring a salvation to you in a way you just don't expect. There's the story of Moses and the Israelites in the desert, where because they were rebelling against Moses, and which meant they were rebelling against
That's
God.
Right.
God sent snakes among them, venomous snakes, so that when they were biting, there were people dying. But they realized they had sinned, and they repented. And the system God used, he says, well, put a brass snake up on a pole in the middle of the camp, and if you get bit, if you go and look at that snake, you are going to be saved. That is a story about Jesus. The people in the camp are like the people that are in the world today. There's good people, there's bad people, there's righteous people, and there's sinners. And who got bit by snakes? Righteous people and sinners. Who got saved? Everybody who looked at the snake on the pole. It didn't matter whether they were sinners or how much they sinned. It mattered on how much faith they had to do this silly, funny thing. Go look at a brown snake and you will be saved. Go look at that thing hanging up on a pole. So God is showing us that is what he was going to do with his son. His son was going to be hung on a pole. In fact, Jesus references this story. He says that he would be raised up like the snake on a pole, and he was. And the people that are saved, everybody who believes in Jesus, everybody who has the faith to look at Jesus hanging on the cross, same as that people who had faith to go look at that bronze snake.
Yeah.
That's just an awesome story.
It is. It is a wonderful story. And it ties the Genesis story to the Moses story to the Jesus story.
Exactly.
All the way through the Bible, yes. And now we are living in that post-Jesus time frame. And so how do we look? How do we find that faith? How do we look to that Jesus for that salvation, for that saving faith? So, yes, well, we hope that you will all take a look at our books, Walking with God Through Life and Finding Jesus in the Old Testament, because in them you too will find God speaking to you.